We're going to bring it to you live. Former CIA Director John Brennan is slamming President Trump today after the White House revoked his security clearance. Brennan called the decision politically motivated in a New York Times op-ed and says President Trump's claims of no collusion with Russia are hogwash. Brennan has frequently criticized the president since he took office. The former CIA chief called President Trump's press conference with Vladimir Duterte in Helsinki, quote, nothing short of treasonous. President Trump told the Wall Street Journal yesterday Brennan is among those he holds responsible for the Russia investigation. CBS News senior national security analyst Fran Townsend joins me now. She was Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor to President George W. Bush. President Trump reportedly made a connection between revoking John Brennan's credentials, his clearance, and his involvement in the Russian probe. What's the significance of that statement?
Well, first of all, it is unprecedented that the President of the United States would personally revoke anyone's clearance. There's normally a process that's run by career civil servants that looks at whether it's going to lapse, whether it's going to be revoked, and the reasons why. This doesn't appear to have had any process. The President seems to have done it personally. And it's not clear that the reasons weren't personally or politically motivated, which is very disturbing.
John Brennan wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. In it, he said, Mr. Trump clearly has become more desperate to protect himself and those close to him, which is why he made the politically motivated decision to revoke my security clearance in an attempt to scare and to silence others who might dare to challenge him. He's saying it's more than just about me.
Well, that's right. Look, there's a list of individuals named from the White House that they're looking at revoking their clearances, but there's a much wider audience, right? There are people whose names are not on that list. Myself, my colleague here, Mike Morrell, we hold security clearances because, by the way, we donate time back to the government and advise them in a classified setting. We couldn't do it without our clearance. And so anybody who's outside of government, who holds a security clearance, who may be asked publicly to comment on the president or the administration, has to feel like they run a risk now that if the president or the White House doesn't like what you say, they may pull your clearance.
So in a way, this could be seen as even damaging to national security. He is taking valuable people out of this brain trust, people who had put in time, have knowledge, have experience, and he's punishing them, in other words. And it's could harm his ability to make decisions and other people in the intelligence community's abilities to make decisions.
That's right. And these are not, the people whose clearances he's talking about revoking were not always politically appointed individuals. Myself, John Brennan, Sally Yates, Mike Hayden, Jim Clapper, all these people were career public servants for most of their careers, and at the very end of their careers served in political positions, but with decades and decades of experience have held these security clearances for decades and volunteer time back to the government. It's not just a professional courtesy that you let people like me keep their clearances. You do it for a reason, right? Because they can provide the government with advice in a crisis.
Now, he has the authority to do this as commander-in-chief. But the fact that he sees himself having the power to do this kind of thing, does that cause you any concern?
So the president said he's relying on his commander-in-chief authority, what we call his constitutional Article II authority. I think we have to understand the president has a pretty expansive view of his Article II powers, and it's the same sort of Article II power that he would rely on, for example, if he wanted to fire Mueller. And so I think we ought to understand the implications of him relying on his Article II power in this instance.
With this action, and I'm going to have you step out on a limb here, if you don't mind. With this action and some of the other actions that this president has taken that has kind of surprised people and feels like he's pushing the envelope, is this time to reassess just how much power, including pardon power, we have given to the executive branch? Are we really looking at equal branches of government, or has the executive branch become too powerful in some ways?
Well, look, in order to assess it, as you say, I mean, there's a constitution, right? And if you want to amend those powers, if you're concerned about the expansiveness of the power, it would require amendment to the Constitution. I mean, I think up to now we have relied on the office of the president to act in the national interest. And I think what's so disturbing now is people are questioning what's the motivation for the president using these powers. It's not that we have a problem with the Constitution or the equal branches of government. It's how those powers are being used. And I think that because of the circumstances and what the president has said in this instance, that's what's causing people to question his use of the powers, not the powers themselves.
Now, there are people who are saying, including Brennan himself, who says this will not shut me up. So if the president he's not taking away his right to speak. He's taking his right to have this current information, right, on national security matters. But in a way, he is stopping him from speaking. And if he took it away from you, for instance, because you were coming on our air, you're being somewhat critical of this decision. If he revoked your clearance, would you be able to advise him in the future?
So, look, we ought to be honest. A security clearance is a privilege, not a right. And by submitting myself to the process to get a clearance, I give up some of my First Amendment freedom of speech, right? I agree to keep secret classified information. Right. But it doesn't mean I or John Brennan or anyone else isn't entitled to an opinion and entitled to voice that opinion. I don't rely on any classified information to do that. But I'm still entitled to have an opinion. And there's something deeply disturbing about trying to restrict someone's ability to speak publicly and voice their opinion, even if you don't like that opinion. You know, there's the old saying, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. And that really strikes home with me, right? I'm not going to be silenced about my opinion, and I rely on the government to act in good faith when they assess my clearance.
Fran Townsend.